Well, speaking of wars of attrition and just going through sheer misery, you published the third version of your book recently.
Oh gosh, yeah.
How was that? Do you want to talk about that experience as well? And what's the book title and where can people find it?
So you and I share a publisher in Kogan Page. And so, the book is Artificial Intelligence for HR. The third edition comes out in September 25.
Sure. And I think just for the audience who may not be aware, but you are the Chief Research Officer at Lighthouse Research and Advisory. And so you're a deep subject matter expert, not only in AI and HR, the book that you wrote, but also in understanding as an industry analyst, the entire HR technology landscape. And so I think, well, first of all, can you tell a little bit about like what Lighthouse is and why, like what are kind of your areas of expertise? And then I want to kind of dig into one of the things you talked about is moving from being reactive to proactive. So maybe you can kind of dovetail off of that.
For sure. So the quick version on Lighthouse is
Welcome to Directionally Correct, a people analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, Ben Eubanks, Chief Research Officer at Lighthouse Research and Advisory and author of Artificial Intelligence in HR. Hey, Directionally Correct fans. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, watch our videos on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization. How you doing?
Doing well. Doing well.
Awesome.
Kids are back at school. It's already got one that's sick. I'm like, this is too early in the year for this.
Well, you got 5 kids, right?
Somebody's always got something, it feels like, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, what's it like having 5 kids? And I think you said you've adopted all of them, right?
So 3 of them are adopted, 1 out of foster care, 2 were adopted privately at birth, and 2 the good old fashioned way, my wife likes to say. So it's an adventure for sure.
So is that 7?
No.
7?
Did I do the math wrong? So we have,
I don't know. I'm doing the math.
there's 5 total. Let's clarify.
5
There are 5 children that I'm aware of. Okay. And 2 of those were adopted. There are 15-year-olds. So I just took them to get a permit test this week. So I am slightly terrified by that. We have a 10 and an 8-year-old that are biological. And then we have a 3-year-old we just adopted out of foster care. So that's 5 total. Come on. We should be able to do this, Cole, as far as math.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think I'd be good at math, but I guess let's see if the data proves us otherwise. But was that like a personal like belief, or was that like is there a backstory there?
So my wife likes to say that when we were dating, we actually met in high school. And so we were dating, talking about our future. And she said, I think I want 2 kids. I wanted 3 kids. And so we settled on 5. So, I mean, the math does seem to work in that sort of case.
Well, yeah, there you go. Well, good for you, man. That's really awesome. And I hear you're also a big runner. Is that true?
That is my thing. I've been a runner longer than I've been anything else. So I've been running since I was in high school, and then ran my first ultramarathon in 2007. And that was an experience. Did not prepare enough for that. My wife is pushing me in a shopping cart in Walmart because I can't walk after it's over with. So we had to go get some things after the race is over. So she's pushing me through the aisles. Grown man in a shopping cart. That was a great memory there for me. Not so much for her. But last year I did my first 50 mile. And so it's something I love. I love challenging. I love pressing the boundaries to see what's possible.
Well, so like, there's so many directions I could go. So 50 miles, is there like a magic to it, or is it just miserable the whole time? Like, what is that like?
There are some people that truly look like it's effortless and it's just like floating on the ground, beautiful style, beautiful form all the way through. I lose that at about 7 miles. Then after that, it's just like, I'm just going to do this. And so it becomes mental at one point. It's different for everybody where that shifts over. But for me, I had done 42 a couple years before and had to drop out because of the heat. And I was not prepared for it. So last year I worked hard, was doing everything I could to get ready for it. And again, the last 10 miles was true misery. But again, there are people that did 78 miles, I think was the record last year for someone in that 12-hour span. And so there are people doing all kinds of stuff like that. The thing that people are hear this are like, wow, that's crazy. That's not for me. What I'll tell you is my wife is a normal human. And a couple of years ago, she said, I wonder how far I could go. And that's how I started this. I wonder how far I could go. So I said, get out there and try it. It's a 12-hour event, and they're all over the country, probably all over the world. And she went out there and she walked and ran and stopped at 31 miles. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And she's not a crazy runner. She doesn't do all those things, but she just said, I'm just going to see how far I can go and press the boundaries and what's possible. And she's like, did I really do that? Yeah, I was there. I remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's actually more impressive almost than your 50 miler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Just getting out there and going. You'd be surprised how far you can cover if you just don't stop.
Well, speaking of wars of attrition and just going through sheer misery, you published the third version of your book recently.
Oh gosh, yeah.
How was that? Do you want to talk about that experience as well? And what's the book title and where can people find it?
So you and I share a publisher in Kogan Page. And so, the book is Artificial Intelligence for HR. The third edition comes out in September 25. So depending on when you're hearing this, it's either in front of you or behind you. And the book is really a look at how to make work more human through the use of technology. I did not want it to be just all hype. I didn't want it to be just all pro technology. I want it to be about how does this help us get to the meaning, the purpose we have taking this kind of job. I mean, I wanted to be in HR when I was a kid. So I have this heart for serving people. And I didn't want the book to get away from that. So to me, the best way to position it is it's really about how do we create more human experiences at work and use technology as a lever to help make that possible.
So this is the third version of the book. What was different in this version versus the prior ones? And I'm going to make a guess it was generative AI, but can you what made this one different?
The fun and challenge of doing a traditional publishing route, as you well know from your own journey, is the second you hand that manuscript to somebody, something happens the next day and you're like, that would have been great to include. I mean, it's not even that. It's a 6-month window usually until it's actually out into the wild. And so the second edition manuscript went in right before ChatGPT launched publicly. So in the book, there's like one reference to new GPT models are coming. They're going to be powerful. They're going to be surprising. And that's about all it says. So yes, there were lots of things to incorporate into the third edition around that. More case studies and examples, lots of stories. Some of the things that I thought forward looking, this is possible. This thing's right there within reach. It was really fun to come back to that and say, yes, it was. And here's the story of what it looks like in practice. So for me, it's really a book to try to get more stories and examples out there because I don't know about you, but I go to so many conferences and I hear people talking about, well, here's 10 ChatGPT use cases. And people are like, I'm past that. I want to get to how do I make real change? How do I make work better? How do I really get to some things, not just automating stuff, because that has only so much value, but how do I get to the things that really create new value for our organization, for my department, for our workforce? And so for me, that's my goal with this is to try to get to those stories. And so someone cannot finish that book and not say, there's not really anything good out there. There's not any really value to come from this.
Well, give us a taste. How do they do that? How do they move to the next step? Do you have like kind of some like apocryphal example or something like that?
Goodness, I want to go in all these different directions. I tell stories about the companies that have automated to the nth degree, and it makes us all get the heebie-jeebies, like horrified by that. A story about a big, large e-commerce company, we'll call it, that automated its entire hiring process for one of its roles, so that if you apply for it, Cole, it would look at your resume. Hey, Cole, spent 2 years at Google, got a bachelor's in engineering, preliminary qualified. Hey, Cole, take this assessment. Let's see how good you really are. You pass the assessment, and it sends you a job offer at the current market rate without you ever talking to a hiring manager, interacting with a recruiter, or anything else. And when I share that example in front of an audience of HR people, there you can hear everybody's horrified by that. And when you ask why, to go a little layer deeper, it's like, Where's the human in this? I wouldn't want to work for a company that did that to me. How do we know the person has values that align with what we're trying to accomplish? You get all these really interesting nuances. And so for me, it helps me to remember that there are some really great areas where we can absolutely automate the heck out of it and not lose any real value of the human connection. But there are other things we cannot. When it comes to the world of people analytics, let's automate early, triage of incoming requests, or being able to pull data from different sources, or some of the sorts of things that the technology has gotten better to do. But it's probably never going to do as great of a job as a Cole could or a Ben could at showing up at a leadership meeting and pitching that idea and wrapping it in a story and connecting the things that matter there. AI can't do that as well as we can, at least right now. And even when it can, you still want to hear and be influenced by somebody else. So there's so much fun covering this as it's evolving and changing. After that book was my first one that came out in 2018. I was like, the next book is not going to be about technology because I don't want to keep updating it every 15 minutes. So I learned that lesson, but it's really been fun to see that evolution over time.
Well, tell me this, and I know we're kind of going rogue here, but the example you use made me think of the recent Workday lawsuit. Does that have any kind of play into what you're mentioning here?
So that one, the Workday lawsuit, for anybody that does not know, is this applicant created a class action saying that they were turned down for jobs they were applying through the Workday ATS. And so they are suing Workday because they think the AI is discriminating. Whether it is or isn't, I have not seen all the discovery. I don't know all the details behind that. I do know that some of the early things that are coming out around that case are weird and just don't make any sense to anyone who's been in this world. For instance, they're asking for a list of customers who are using this AI tool that was bought after Workday acquired it. Mm-hmm. So it's weird. Anyway, I might have said that backwards. Who used this tool and then Workday acquired the company later. So it's doesn't make any sense to even try to explain why that is. But all the pieces around that, do I care for candidates that are getting turned down? Yes. Do I care especially for those who are getting turned down for reasons that are discriminatory? Absolutely. Are the ATSs set up to do that? Not really. No, they're looking at knockout questions. And if you don't meet these certain criteria, there's a lot of candidates out there. Like, there are things that are perfectly legit people get knocked out for. And today you can go and spend 2 minutes on LinkedIn and see a dozen people that are frustrated about not getting through the clutter, not getting through the algorithms, if you want to call them that. And it's just a hard market. And so I think that's a symptom of that partially. And again, I wish I could see behind the scenes on some of this stuff, because I could make some more judgments about what is really happening, what's real, and what's just a shot at a big company that's making a lot of money. I don't know how to weigh that out, from the outside.
Sure. And I think just for the audience who may not be aware, but you are the chief research officer at Lighthouse Research and Advisory. And so you're a deep subject matter expert, not only in AI and HR, the book that you wrote, but also in understanding, as an industry analyst, the entire HR technology landscape. And so I think, well, first of all, can you tell a little bit about like what Lighthouse is, mm-hmm. and why, like, what are kind of your areas of expertise? And then I want to kind of dig into one of the things you talked about is moving from being reactive to proactive. And so maybe you can kind of dovetail off of that.
For sure. So the quick version on Lighthouse is there are lots of analysts in the HR tech industry. Everybody knows some of the big ones that are out there, but we are just focused on that HR spectrum. So from hiring to benefits to learning development, talent management, comp, doing a big study on comp right now that's got me, worn out, but also excited in a nerdy way. So we cover all those sorts of things on the technology side. Who provides it? What are the differentiators? What are the technologies that are doing creative things? Who is saying a lot and not doing very much? So we get to see all the behind the scenes on that and then share those things out. The other part, though, is we do research surveys with workers, with candidates, with employers, and try to understand what's happening on the trend side in the market and share that data back with other leaders like many of you listening in here. They're trying to figure out what should we be doing? What should our priorities be? How are other companies figuring this out? And so for me, when I was an HR leader myself working in that field, I didn't have a budget for research. I didn't have I didn't know how to get to these answers. And so I've made it a goal to try to expand that and share that as widely as possible. Companies large and small, anyone on the team can find something of value in there, really written in a down to earth sort of way, not ivory tower looking down our nose at you, telling you you're doing it wrong and give us a lot of money, we'll fix it for you. Like that's not our approach and our model generally. So that's some of Lighthouse and what we do. As you mentioned, that one of my big themes this year for me is moving from reactive to proactive. I had this problem, and everybody that I've ever met that's working in this field has the problem of we often get caught in just reacting to stuff that comes in. It's how work is like designed almost, it feels like. There's always some fire to put out. And some of us have actually used that phrase this week even. Hey, I'm putting out a lot of fires, like it's a badge of honor. And I would challenge anyone who says that should not be something you celebrate, right? Sure, the fire's out, great, let's celebrate that part, but let's not celebrate the act of doing that, because that means you're always just reacting, responding, and not planning and being thoughtful and being careful about how you're spending your time. There's a gentleman that I follow in the industry, and he's like, you have a limited amount of time, money, and attention. And that applies to all of us. And if you're spending all of your attention or all of your time on things that are just popping up and not all those things that really need to get done and we can't quite get there, then we're missing out on the chance to have probably our best and biggest impact on the people around us and on the business.
Yeah. Back when I was leading functions internally, I had a rule called no diving catches. And what it means is a lot of times people will make like work extreme overtime, do something, make something amazing in like the last minute and so they make a diving catch at work. Right. And I would always say it's like a lot of people reward the diving catch when I say that is a reflection of poor planning, bad processes, and not being proactive enough. And so in my mind, no diving catches is like a really good policy to have if you're in this space.
I'm writing that one down. I'm literally writing it down right now. No diving catches. I love the idea there. There's a great book called Upstream. Have you read it?
Mm-mm.
Oh my goodness. So it actually talks about this problem where if Cole shows up and saves the day, everybody's applauding, everybody's celebrating, everybody is so grateful for that save that they forget that Cole should have done this one thing 6 months ago. Sorry to put you on the spot. 6 months ago, Cole would have done this thing was this big. It would have just not been a problem at all. But because he didn't, he delayed, it became this big thing to have to save at the end. And the book is all about these examples of that and in life, in our world of social around us, everything else. And so one of the examples is, do we have a police force that is chasing people down and always trying to catch them and always doing things? Or do we just park a police car at this intersection where people are always driving through a little fast to make them more cautious because they see the police car there? It costs almost nothing to do that. We're preventing things. We're thinking ahead versus trying to clean up after people have accidents because they're driving recklessly in that area and trying to do that. So it's like all these examples of that, and that applies in our work too. So no diving catches. I love that approach. I'll be quoting you henceforth.
Yeah, feel free. Well, I think you mentioned you have like what got me curious in addition to your book, Ben, is you mentioned you have some research coming out about creating a more data-driven HR function. And with the nature of our podcast being very analytics oriented, I was hoping maybe you could share some of the insights that you learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually surveyed just over 1,000 employers, HR leaders, analytics leaders, people officers, this group of people that are in our sphere for everybody listening. And then we also actually surveyed a couple of hundred business leaders outside of HR. So supply chain, marketing, sales, a little bit of everything in that bucket. And for that audience, that second audience, we actually asked them some perception questions of how's HR doing? How are your analytics people doing around this? Are they doing a good job telling stories? Do you really see the value they're bringing? And in many cases, we found that the answers that HR gives are positive. I won't say Pollyanna, but too positive compared to what their leaders outside of that are saying. And so there's a perception gap. Number one, we definitely see that, and it's very real. But the other thing that I saw in this that really excited me when we started trying to get into what are the key things that set apart a company, because in there we found companies, Cole, that were incredible, that were doing great things, that were very proactive, that were using data to tell stories, that were connected with their leadership in lockstep and leading to great business outcomes and people outcomes, not mutually exclusive. Let's try to make people happy. who cares what happens with the business, or vice versa. And the companies that were doing the best at that, they had a couple of key things in place. So like every nerdy analyst, I've got to come up with some acronym or a model to try to explain that. I think it's a rule somewhere in our handbook. So I went with LIFT, LIFT. So the first of the four things, Cole, is leadership support. When you have that leadership support around you, those HR teams that say they're supported by the leadership are more likely to have an approach that's balanced between the people and the data. And I know everybody here's like, data, love me some data. Listen, I agree with you. I'm with you on that. But one of the things I've had to transition some of our people to think about is the data isn't the answer. The data helps us get to the answer. The data helps us understand what really is happening so we can actually take action on it. The data itself doesn't actually solve any problems at all. All right, so leadership support, the insights. Do we bring just stats and figures and facts, or do we bring an insight and help someone know what to do with that? Do we help someone with a piece of information they can use to make a decision right now, or just something else they have to keep in their head until the moment that it applies? So one of the quick examples of that is in our research, when we're surveying candidates this year as part of hiring, we found that candidates are 50% more likely to click on a job posting that talks about the industry they'll be in. Backwards. 50% more likely to click on a job posting that talks about the impact they'll have over the industry they're in. Okay. That is an insight that tells us something we need to go do. If my job ads and postings don't talk about the impact they'll have, I am missing out on candidate interest. So that's an insight versus saying, oh, we looked at these two things and this was 50% higher. Stop. No, let's actually know what to do. Number 3 on that, F, is frame the narrative. Are we wrapping this in a story that makes sense, that's compelling, that touches on those things that our leaders care about? Because if we're just talking in all of our HR terms, even in terms of things like retention and turnover that do matter to the business leaders, we're missing out. One of the stats that blew me away, that stunned me in this, was when we found teams that said, yeah, we're not really good at telling stories of data. We're not quite there where we need to be. Those teams, we asked them what they share with leadership, were much more likely to be using turnover as their primary and only metric in many cases. They would give up everything else and just say turnover. It's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Every problem looks like a nail. And that's sort of what it is. When you can't tell a story, you just fall back on this comfortable, well, people will leave, instead of telling something else that's more compelling. And the last piece is technology. So we can't do these things if we don't have tools around us. We don't have the technology around us, because none of us are smart enough, can hold enough data in our heads, or can find those trends and insights without having some sort of technology underpinning on that. So that's the big pieces of that. And for me, it's been really helpful to help teams that are new to, we're good at this. And for some of those of you listening are like, well, yeah, we're doing all those. Great. We can all do those probably a little better. We can all get a little bit sharper on those things. And so it's been fun to see the uptake of that research so far.
Yeah. Is HR, generally speaking, good at telling stories with data? And if not, what should they do?
Generally speaking, no. I feel like someone needs a hug right now. Like generally HR is not good at those things. And can I tell a story on myself real quick? Do
it.
So the first HR job I ever had, I was the new person on the team, bottom rung on the ladder. I got all the jobs nobody else wanted. So it was my job to process new hires and terminations. We had about 700 employees, 50% turnover a year. So every day I was processing someone who was coming in or leaving, and sometimes the same person the same day. It was just radical and terrible. So after 3 months of this, I thought, we can't let this go on forever. So I went and looked at all the data I could find on turnover. I plugged it into the HR system we had that no one had ever used before, and started looking at the trends and saying, hey, look, I actually see what we can do about this. So I took all that data. I went to my boss and said, hey, here's what I'm seeing and all the trends around this. We have a turnover issue. You know about it. Here's what we can do. And she said, okay, thanks. Go get back to work. And that's it. It never was brought up again. Nothing was done. And I learned the hard way that I can't just create urgency when there isn't any, or I can't make them feel that same level of excitement around this, because I've been neck deep in it the whole time, that I'm feeling. I didn't ask for context. She may have brought this to her leadership a month before and they told her no, and this was all wasted time and I didn't know it. Or if I had just said, hey, listen, the problem isn't us being competitive. We're a nonprofit. We're not really competing. But the problem is we're not able to serve enough clients. We could serve more of them We can get that heart of service and community behind the business if we would do this. I didn't really key in on those things at all. It was just like, here's all the stuff. And she didn't care, or she didn't respond to it in the way that I thought she would. So I learned the hard way that if you don't tell the story well, it's not going to work out. It's not going to lead to the outcomes you're looking for. And you're going to end up frustrated ultimately.
Well, first of all, well done at like using data as like a generic HR person. Like that is so uncommon. But second of all, like I cannot tell you how valuable hearing that story is for individuals. Like, one of the things that it's not really a criticism, but I get often from folks who are listeners to the podcast is, Cole, we're new to the field. Can you guys give us more advice? I'm like, yeah, we've given advice like 100 times on the podcast. Like, do we have to do it every week? But like, I feel like the advice you just gave is so good for somebody who's new to doing this effectively. And I really appreciate you sharing that. That was really excellent.
Well, absolutely. Again, if I've done it wrong and I can help someone else not do it wrong, I am all for sharing those stories. Half of the things I share on it when I'm speaking on a stage are like, I've screwed this up royally. Please don't follow my footsteps on that. Like, do it better. You can do it.
Well, you moved from being an HR person to the analyst side of the table, which is kind of a different side of the table. I guess the question I have for you is, why did you do that? And is that a logical career path for people who are interested in that space? Or is it like today's analyst, tomorrow's industry influencer? Like, can you give kind of your thoughts on all of that?
I hate the influencer term. I hate that so much, although it's used all the time. So I started out in HR. I loved it. Got my degree in the field, got certified, all the things. And I had a chance in 2014 to try working at an analyst firm because I've been speaking and writing on the side already. It was not a new thing. I was already doing those things just for fun on the side because I liked them. And I had a chance to start doing those professionally. And I thought, if this is terrible, I'll just go back and get another job as an HR leader. No big deal. And I ended up loving the work. I love the team, didn't love the company. So I moved on from there. But the team and the work that I got to do, it stunned me that how many, and honestly, being people who work in people analytics are going to feel this, are going to get this. But in HR generally, or in talent or in learning, when someone says, man, that's a problem we have, I wonder what the answer is. And they just kind of put that aside and move on with their day because there's no real answer to it. All of us here, like, there may be an answer. Let's go look at the data and find out. And for me, I got to start doing that broadly. So instead of just helping the 100, 200, 300 employees who are under my care as an HR leader, I got to do that for potentially millions of employees if I could help their leaders influence them through the research. Can someone go down that path? Yes, absolutely. We're seeing that more and more. Again, legacy, like IDC, Gartner, Forrester, like those are the big sort of analyst firms in the space, and they have a certain reputation. The newer analysts, like I'm a class of, are a little bit different, a little bit more accessible, generally easier to work with, some of those sorts of things. There's different benefits and different approaches. And there's this class of influencers, which is its other sort of thing. Someone that generally has an opinion about things. And some of them are opinionated because they do HR work for a company, which is great, but you're using that N of one to try to tell everybody else what the right thing to do is. And I say that knowing that I did that myself. I was sharing from my own journey, from my own experiences, being open about that up until the moment that I got access to research. And suddenly I was like, okay, now I can talk about this across the board. I can say, like the research I just talked about, we looked at over 1,000 different organizations, just like all of you work at, that can hear my voice right now. And here's what we found. And the level of insight that I get from that is sometimes tells me I was wrong with what I believed before. Sometimes tells me I was completely right. And sometimes I get to admit that I've been saying this, I found that it's now wrong, but here going forward, at least know the right answer. And so to me, that is what drew me into it. I love asking questions. I love asking hard questions. I love pushing the boundaries of what's possible. My favorite things to do, honestly, in this field of work are when someone says, oh, we've got this problem. We don't think there's a way to get an answer for this. And I love trying to crack that nut and find a way to get an answer to something that no one else can. We did that for one of a company a few years ago. And we talked to 3 other companies that said this can't be done. And we found a way to design an experiment, not just surveys, but an actual experiment to get at that. And so, like I always said, if I was not an HR person, I would have been an economist probably. I just love getting into that side of why decisions are made at a individual level and at a big level. And what can we learn from that?
I love that. And that's actually we share that similarity. Having what I'm doing now, I'm very in the labor economics space for sure.
Yes.
One of the things I think about in the analyst space is, and so like we've only had one industry analyst as a guest before on the podcast. So we had Stacia from Red Thread, you, me, and her actually did a webinar a couple of years ago, which was a lot of fun. You're the second, but I'm actually thinking of having a few more on in the coming weeks and months, just for this reason, which is I don't think most people understand how much industry analysts actually influence the technology roadmap for most of the technology vendors as to what gets built, what gets seen, and what never actually gets made. So it's like kind of the things that never were.
Yes.
And so what I was hoping maybe you could comment is kind of what role do industry analysts play in that, but also if you're an organization, when is it helpful to call an industry analyst and when is it not?
So analysts typically will serve like the vendors in the market, like the Lightcasts of the world and others. And we also serve employers that are trying to figure out some of these big thorny issues. So gosh, as you were saying that a minute ago on some of the things that never get built, I was thinking to a very specific thing that came up about 2 weeks ago. I met with a vendor about a year and a half ago. They were talking about this big thing they were excited about. We're building it. Look at all this. It's all just like PowerPoint, not an actual product yet. I'm like, it sounds interesting. Can't wait to see it live. And then we met just 2 weeks ago and no mention. And I was like, hey, whatever happened to that? Oh yeah, we decided not to. I'm like, wow. They spent all this time and effort building up to it and then decided to not do it because it felt too far outside their wheelhouse. So I'm like, yes, lots of advice and advisory sessions where something gets nixed before it ever gets out into the real world. I'm sorry. I went all over the place. And I was like, when should someone reach out? Was that the right question? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So if you
just give the context, like here's my perspective on it. Sure. And this is kind of a newer thing for me. I think I've kind of always kind of sort of knew this, but I really know it now. And it is, there's like this hidden community of people, and they're not really hidden, but it's like the analysts, the people who lead product functions, kind of like there's this like people who go to conferences a lot. You can even say the influencers sometimes as well. They're really shaping the future of HR from a technology lens. And if you're a run of the mill kind of just HR business partner or HR leader, you probably don't even really know very much about it. And so I was wondering, maybe you could kind of give us a key to the unlock there, but also like how to utilize that kind of hidden community for the purposes of like, when to call them, when not to call them, but really like what's going on there. And like, how can you, like, if you're really like, if you feel really passionate about something happening in HR technology, how can you influence to become something that actually exists versus, it's just an idea you had once and then the world moved on?
Well, if someone's listening right now and they heard you say that, Cole, and you're like, I have some ideas I think would be interesting and helpful. I mean, listen, you can reach out to lots of the startups that are out there and say, hey, can I help out? I'm actually a practitioner. I do this work day to day. I'd love to be an advisor or support you. Most of the time they're like, heck yes, please give us input and advice. We appreciate that because we're still trying to get our first customer, trying to get, some critical mass. So they take that sort of thing. I even talk to sometimes employers who are at mid to enterprise in terms of size that seek out some smaller vendors that they can influence the roadmap themselves because they have ideas on what they want it to be and they'll help shape that. They want an active voice in it, not just we want to be along for the ride, whatever you're building, we'll just take. They want to actually influence because they have a perspective on that. And I've seen some creative ways that's played out over the last few years. So if someone is listening to that and that part's interesting to you, those things are absolutely possible. When it comes to having a conversation with an analyst like me or someone who does, Stacia is another great one, someone I highly respect. Her and Danny are incredible. If you want to talk to someone like that, we love conversations because for us, it's work. For you, it may just be a discussion, but for us, we're always gathering intel on everything we can. And even if I'm not saying, hey, I just talked to the head of XYZ company, for me, it's helpful to be able to say, listen, I talked to the company in the aerospace industry just last week. Here's the challenge they're dealing with. I don't have to name drop anybody, but for me, it helps me to be credible when I'm talking to the vendors, when I'm sharing with them. And it helps you because you're getting to tap into whatever we're seeing across the market, whether it's, hey, we're looking for a solution for this. Who should we be thinking about? Cole, who does labor market intelligence? Anybody you know? Like someone might want to know those things, right? And also to say, what are you seeing in the research? Hey, Ben, you mentioned that stuff on the podcast. Can you go like a layer deeper and tell me what that looked like for companies who are mid-sized or whatever else. And so we do things like that with employers. And to me, that's some of the most fun that I've ever had, because the variations in those questions are endless. And again, some of the same joy I get from answering a big, hard question is the same joy that many of you get when you have to figure out, okay, I've got a question here. It's a business problem. What data do we have? Can we solve it? How do we get that? How do we structure it? How do we tell the story out of it? That same thing you're doing in that sort of internal sense is what I help do at an external, broader market sense.
Absolutely. I love that, Ben. Can I ask you a personal question? And I've been wanting to ask you this for a while. But I grew up in rural North Louisiana. I had a very, very thick kind of Southern accent growing up. I think you're based in Alabama.
Yep.
You have somewhat of a thick Southern accent as well. What is it like doing all of this with a Southern accent, in 2025 in today's economy? And just what's your experience been like?
The first time I ever did a webinar, it was probably 15 years ago now. The comment that I will never forget, someone's like, where the heck did they find this guy? Sounds like yeehaw, or something like that. Like that's their comment. I'm like, wow, okay. I did not realize that it was that noticeable, but apparently it is. And so, yes, it's toned down probably, but there's the occasional y'all that slips out and stuff like that. So it is kind of interesting. The parts that I go back to, again, data nerd. So I look at the data around how the Southern accent is perceived in the US. And if you are someone within the US and you hear that instinctively or not, they automatically assume your IQ is lower when you have a Southern accent, or you speak a little slower, you have that drawl just because of the way we talk. Then you go external. You look at the global scene. And what you find is when they survey people around the world about American accents, the Southern accent's the sexiest. And so, I've got to give a trade-off there, Cole, of which one do I want to be? Do I want to be smart, or do I want to be, appealing in some way? And so I think I'll probably make it out, but it is interesting. I do get comments. I do get people asking about that. I've never seen someone say, oh, wow, that Boston accent is so pronounced. Like that's interesting. No one ever says that in meetings with other people. But when I speak, sometimes I'm like, oh, I can tell you're from somewhere down south. I'm like, yeah, sure. That's okay. So it's fun though. To me, I just teach myself sometimes that I grew up in a town of 10,000 people and get to do the work that I do, influencing global organizations every day. It blows me away to think that I have that chance, that opportunity, and that privilege when, again, growing up in Alabama, you don't wear shoes until you're 5 years old. You just run around barefoot everywhere. So
that's not necessarily true, everybody who's listening, but yeah, that's funny.
I got you with that one. You were flashing back. You're like young Cole there standing barefoot in the picture.
No, but well, it's funny actually for me to have seen the journey of y'all, the word, where when I grew up, like teachers would literally like try to stamp that out of you because to not be seen as uneducated, but then it became like this term that's like gender inclusive.
Yes.
And so now like I see somebody in San Francisco or New York City be saying y'all, and I'm like, this seems so forced. And whereas like I can't even say it anymore, because like I get like bad memories of childhood.
You trained it out of yourself. Yes. Someone's telling you no.
So it's very funny to see that, but I really appreciate you sharing that, Ben. You want to join me in Cole's Corner?
Let's make it happen.
Welcome to Cole's Corner. All right. So the first, let's do some rapid fire. The first question I have for you, and again, we've never talked about this, so I don't know, but I'm just going to make a guess.
Oh, let's go.
You're based in Alabama. What is the best SEC football team and why?
We are football agnostic as a family, which has probably saved us more friendships than it's cost us over the years. I think technically I have to say Alabama, but we don't have a dog in that fight.
He just whispered that for people who are listening. All right, so not an Auburn guy. That's good to know.
I didn't say that. Listen, my mom's from Ohio. My dad's from Tennessee. So if I say Buckeyes or Vols, I get my car's going to end up with a broken windshield. So I just don't say anything, and I'm safe.
All right. What's the place you've never been to that you most like to go, and why?
Oh my goodness. Probably Italy. I've heard some cool stuff. There was an analyst event happening there a few years ago for one of the vendors, and it just conflicted with something else that I had going on, and I couldn't quite get there. And I was like, they'll do it again. Nope. They did it once and never again. So I missed my one shot where someone else would have paid for me to go to Italy and go sightseeing. So I've seen some pretty cool places, but that's one that's still on my list.
Oh, fantastic. We've already touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to dig into it deeper. Why do you do what you do?
When I started out, no one that's hear me now after hearing all this other stuff is going to be surprised that I'm a preparer, reader, super nerd that loves to know everything. I started looking at what it took to be successful in HR when I was reading about this as I was going through college. And all I could find was very executive level, high level stuff, building your strategic plans and things like that. Like, no one's going to let me touch that stuff for years. And I couldn't find anything about how to be good at this from the ground up. So as I took my first day on the job, I said, here's what I did. And I started writing about this stuff on the side and just sharing about it openly. And at one point, there were 30,000 people a month reading that blog, just following on how to do those things that I was learning day to day. And I wasn't there. I had not arrived. I still haven't arrived, right? But I was just sharing those things that I learned. And from then, I've just committed my life. Listen, I want to make HR better, one HR pro at a time. That's all it takes. Change one life, help one person. And someone out there right now, I hope you're one of those people, because that's my mission in life. And if so, then give a thumbs up from me, because that's what I'm trying to do here.
What's the weirdest termination you ever witnessed in HR?
Oh my goodness. The very first one, actually. So when I worked at that company I mentioned earlier, lots of turnover, 24 hours a day, operation 7 days a week. We were providing direct care for the developmentally disabled and the mentally ill. Really tough work, not high pay. Well, one Monday I get in, unlock the file room because I had the glorious key to the file room, and the fax machine is full, which means bad things. Lots of witness statements from a problem over the weekend. And turns out there's going to be a termination because this woman had gotten frustrated with one of the other young ladies working there. Young lady was pregnant, was not married. So this lady started following her around the office, calling her a fornicator, telling her she was going to put a voodoo curse on her unborn child. It was the weirdest thing. And so, listen, investigation's done. I asked the HR business partner, can I sit in on this? I've never been on termination. This just happened to be one that popped up. And so he's telling her employment's ended. He gets up and walks out of the room. And we're in this tiny closet of a conference room. And I'm sitting here face to face with her thinking, the last employee she was around, she cursed. And I'm sitting here all alone. I'm like 20 years old. I wait maybe 30 seconds, longest 30 seconds of my life. And I'm going to check on the paperwork. And I dive out the door. Like, I'm sure it looked super awkward and weird, but I did not get cursed. So there is that.
See, you've proved for the 1,000th time why I don't claim to be an HR person, because I've never dealt with anything like that. Thank goodness. So thank you for falling on that grenade.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. All right. I got one big question for you. So we started out talking about your book, but I'd been kind of saving this up because I thought this was a really interesting thing. And I'm curious to your perspective. So you wrote the first version of your book about artificial intelligence in HR in 2017. Mm-hmm. You're one of the people, one of the few people in the world who's been talking about AI in HR for the longest period of time, right? From 2017 till now. What do you know about AI in HR that no one else knows, or that you're most hesitant to share?
Oh my gosh. That no one else knows. I think lots of people know pieces of that. I'd like to think that I have a better overall perspective of it that gives me some insight that others may not have, right? Because I see it in learning and in talent and in HR and in other areas, and get to fit those pieces together, or say, hey, this is some cool happening over in learning. Why don't we apply this to how we look at candidates and screening? The thing that I'm hesitant to share, I think you said, the part that's been weird to me is I've educated on this for a long time. Before anybody could be an expert on using ChatGPT, I was talking about how to use these tools to save time so you can find more meaning in your work, not just to be more efficient, producing more widgets, but finding more meaning, helping more people. Yeah, I'm all on board with that. And so I educated a lot on those things. And then the data started coming out in the last year or so around all the risks and all the problems and all the issues that's creating people using those tools. And so I've had to be a little more tempered in my approach, saying, hey, you can use it for these things, but don't use it for those. Don't brainstorm with it because you're harming your creative and critical thinking skills. Don't use it for every outlet. I posted on this morning on LinkedIn. Don't use it for every single question or comment when you would have otherwise said, hey, Cole, you got a minute? I want to chat with you about this, because you're killing those connections with other humans. And that's one of the key things that sets us apart from all these other algorithms. So again, I could go into all these little fun things, but that's some of the stuff top of mind for me. That's things that are coming that I'm truly worried about, things that I've seen change over time that I'm excited about, and everything in between.
Leading a growing business, it's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision-making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
So would it be fair to say this is like super interesting? I'm starting to understand kind of your line of thinking, which is I see you as a very, like future oriented person. You were early into usage of AI in HR. You were thinking about all the use cases before no one even knew what AI was, right? Now, because you were so early, you're actually seeing the ramifications of it earlier than others as well. And so you're trying to maintain humanity while being proactive and future oriented. And it's a difficult balance to strike. Would that be a fair way of describing it?
That is a great way of putting it. It's very much more eloquent, Mr. Louisiana, than Mr. Alabama. Yes. But really, it is that. The hard part for me is, and for you too, right? You're in a lot of these conversations about what's coming, what's next. You're seeing the front end of things that you are building at Lightcast, for example, on the data side. And for us, we're like, we've been talking about this forever. And for some people, it's the first time to hear about it and see it. And so how do I balance that? Someone's new to this with, hey, for those of you who are already really entrenched in it, I've got to give you some other things to think about. And to me, that's the hardest part of sharing this stuff with an audience is some people are hearing this and like, well, I did this crazy thing that you'll never even believe. I'm like, yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff out there like that. But also I'm like, well, I've got to be careful about these things are causing real problems. And some people don't know it yet. And again, I feel like I'm sort of responsible. I've been helping people do this for a while. So I'm trying to find the right balance to make that work.
No, I love that. And not only working at Lightcast, but I mean, just by nature of this podcast, and we have episodes on where different vendors kind of bring kind of their newest and latest products. But also I see a lot of them, probably frankly, even more outside of the podcast because people just bring kind of like what they're doing to me and just say like, hey, what do you think about this? And what's super interesting, and this is why I asked you the question earlier about being an industry analyst and seeing what gets built and trying to shape the future, but also seeing what doesn't get built, is I'm always trying to be like, when I'm giving folks advice, I'm always trying to give them the advice about like maximizing gain without minimizing harm. Right. Mm-hmm. And so can you do something that kind of keeps humans relevant, frankly? Like, hey, like this is kind of tongue in cheek, but I always use this as the first example. If like, a firm's trying to build an AI tool, is the first use case they should go after like automation, or is it trying to read our minds, right? And it's like, and everybody always wants to skip to the sci-fi examples of, let's let it read our minds and do everything for us and replace humans. Like, humans aren't necessary, right? They're just an antiquated, jumble of DNA that's no longer relevant when you've got AI. Or we could use it to make work more human. And it's like, why don't we focus people and try to channel the energy towards the making work more human and less so on reading our minds?
Well, I don't want anyone else to steal that line, but that's the approach that I've taken, and why I think when I speak on this topic, either at a conference or I was out at a company in California a few weeks ago, they had their global HR team come in, all 50 of them from around the world. And we talked about these use cases for AI. And they said specifically, we want people to finish this informed, but also excited about what's possible. We don't want them to be terrified. We don't want them to be like put to sleep. And so striking that balance is hard because you've got to talk about technology and data and evidence and everything else. And at the same time, what's possible? What's our hope for the future? The automation example you just gave there, one of the things I love talking about, I used to have this slide in there that showed that human creativity, the little carrot, right, out is greater than automation. Because I went back and looked at this experiment, this piece of research that was done by a gentleman, Dennis Stouffer, a few years ago. And he surveyed company founders with he actually gave them a test on innovativeness or creativity. And what he found was you see the normal distribution curve of those scores on that test. Some people are not very creative. Some are super creative and lots of them in the middle. And then he looked at the value those companies created in terms of jobs created, in terms of profit and revenue. And what you found is there was a linear curve there for people. The higher your score, the more you created in terms of value. Again, not just revenue, but jobs created for people. But what was wild is that final 5 to 10%, it was hockey stick off the charts in terms of the value those companies created. And so human creativity can do some amazing things. And there's this weird problem where people think, oh, AI is super creative. Look, it created a song like Taylor Swift style about people analytics. Look how cool it is. That's not creative. It's just pulling from a pattern. It's giving you an answer based on something that's already out there. It's not generating something net new and creative that wasn't there before or wasn't drawn from something else. And we as humans can do that sort of thing. We can have that spark of creativity, dream up something that's never been done, and go and do that. And AI can't do it in the same sort of way. And that's one of the things that's been weird where people think AI is creative and it's not. So to your point on that, should we just automate stuff or should we do other things that actually add real value? Let's automate some things and use that freed up time to go add some new value.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love the research example as well. I think that's a good lead into the what I'm reading section of this where we cover some research articles. So let me pull up my screen. So the first one we've got today is from the Journal of Business Psychology, The Effect of Adaptive Organizational Culture on Long-Term Survival by a few authors, but one of them is Nikki Blacksmith. So she posted about it on LinkedIn. So the research was conducted in 2016, but she's talking about how adaptive organizational culture is so relevant with the seismic shifts that are going on with artificial intelligence right now. And so she gives a few prescriptions here about how to develop an adaptive culture. So develop your team's adaptability skills, including resilience, uncertainty tolerance, and problem solving. Cultivate a mindset of continuous learning and curiosity, and recognize and prioritize that your people are the core of adaptive mechanisms. So what did you get a look at this one, Ben, and what did you think about it?
This was the nerdiest one of the three, Cole, honestly. Right out of a journal. What's fun to me is this ties right in with the last chapter in the book on AI. I know the publisher wants me to keep talking about it, but I'm talking about it because it's relevant, not because they said to. The last chapter in that book talks about the human skills of work, and several of them popped out in that post that she made about that article, about the key pieces there, like being resilient, adaptability, curiosity. Those are key things that set great humans apart from the rest. Always have, always will. And in a world with more AI and automation in it, those are the things that set us apart from all those other sorts of tools that are entering the workplace. And so for organizations to succeed and thrive long-term, I think all of us would agree, yes, having curious, having adaptable, that's one of those things where yes, of course we know that, we agree with that. It's good to have data to back that up and to prove it out, because those leaders that are just saying, no, it's just results. It's just this quarter. It's just this thing, all that stuff that's not outlined in what the research covers, it gives you something to fight back against. Say, yeah, but we probably shouldn't shortcut this because we'll do great numbers this year. And then 10 years from now, no one will remember who we are.
Absolutely. I love that. And, well, you said that was nerdy. I got even more nerdy for you. So I've got another journal article. So this is in the Journal of International Selection and Assessment, recently published very recent in May of 2025 by Lewis Hickman and a few others. I met Lewis at PsyOp, I think a year or two ago, maybe try to get him on the podcast. So any of you out there know Lewis, tell him to reach out to me. But the journal article is called "Can Interviewees Fake Out AI? Comparing the susceptibility and mechanisms of faking across self-reports, human interview ratings, and AI ratings." So essentially from a design standpoint, they were having, I think it's about 150 participants go through kind of like a simulated interview where they were ranked by themselves, by human raters, and by AI raters. And kind of the net of it was, and they did two conditions where the participants just kind of tried to be themselves, and then in the other, they tried to fake out the interviewers to presumably be better than they really were. And one of the things that they found is the biggest difference in terms of did the faking work was on themselves. So the self-reported improvement was huge. Like they're like, yes, I'm so good at faking out the interviewers. What they found is there were really very little differences between the AI interview ratings and the structured human ratings. And so I guess the story here is not only are the interviewees not faking out the AI, but they're not faking out the humans either. And so I thought this one was neat. But what did you think about this research, Ben?
So I was looking at it. It's funny you went across this whole thing. I went right to the AI stuff because that's where I'm most curious, and I've seen some of the technologies built to do that kind of thing, and so I wanted to understand it through that lens. One of the things that was a call out in there somewhere in their findings was that the benefit of AI is that inter-rater reliability is not a problem because it's going to see the same person the same way today, next week. It's not going to be hungover. It's not going to need a coffee. It's not going to be tired. It's not in those things. It's going to be seen the same way. And so like, that's a good thing. And then go back to the workday piece we mentioned earlier on, right? That's one of the things that's interesting is AI has the opportunity to actually remove some of the bias or at least make it auditable in a way that humans, if so-and-so never picks a woman for their team and always has a reason why, we can't audit their brain and find out why they're doing that or call them to task on it specifically other than the outcomes. So anyway, around the article here, though, like the piece of that, I was fascinated too. I laughed like Dunning-Kruger, like I'm great at everything, Cole. Didn't you know that? Have you met me? Look how great I am at all these things, especially at interviewing. And that one stood out to me. And there are some pretty wild AI tools out there that are really great. There's a whole class of them that have built, Cole, just to catch people who are faking at interviews, essentially. So it's been wild to see.
Well, the interesting part here, I may have not really misrepresented, but I'll just give a little bit more information. You can fake out the AI and the interviewer ratings. It's just a lot less. Yeah. And the interesting part to me is they're not that different from one another, but you can fake out humans a little bit more than you can fake out the AI. And so to your point about the hungover person, maybe that's the variance that's being accounted for here by the little bit less that you can fake out the AI. So I love this thought here, but I guess what it does give out there is there's a little bit of hope for you guys out there that are trying to fake it till you make it. So good luck. You can fake out the AI a little bit. You can fake out humans a little bit more, but you can fake out yourself the most. So well done.
Oh my goodness. We need a moment of silence for all those who thought they were faking it, doing real well. So,
all right. We got one more. So let me pull this up real quick. This is from the Talent Strategy Group. So Mark Efron, friend of the podcast, previous guest, wrote an article called CEO's 3 Questions About Talent. And so their viewpoint, just to kind of distill it down, is if you really were to go across and ask all the CEOs, what are the things that they actually care about with talent? It boils down to these 3 questions, which is, what is our 3-year plan to win through talent? How will we build a deep bench of high-performing talent? And what capabilities do we need to achieve our strategy, right? And so the first question I have for you on this one, and then I'll give kind of my thoughts on it, Ben, is from your experience being an HR person and being an industry analyst, do you think that these are the questions that HR are prioritizing the answer to most? And if so, why? If not, what are they prioritizing in its place?
I actually was with a group, a healthcare organization in Montreal not too long ago, and they had me come and speak with their team about hiring, retention, the data around that, some of the challenges around talent scarcity in their markets for certain skills. And I shared all these things, but it felt weird, Cole, because I'm in the room talking to people that you and I would perfectly be comfortable talking to, their HR team, their talent team, their people analytics team. There's also a chief nursing officer over here and head of cardiology over there. And I was like, this feels really kind of weird. And I'm not in the right place or not. But after I finished sharing on these things, the CEO gets up and she goes through their SWOT analysis, and half of their threats and weaknesses were a lack of talent depth in key areas of the business. I was like, okay. Now I wish I'd known that before I started. I could have tied in better with that. But that just showed me that leader, that's on their key set of priorities. And that's why I had a chance to come and speak alongside them to bring an external perspective from the research on here's some ways to solve for this stuff because it was a priority for that leader. Do I think most HR leaders are ready to ask those 3 questions and ready to actually act on whatever they hear back? I would say there's plenty of them that would struggle. Maybe I could get to 1, maybe 2, but to say, what's the plan around this and how we're going to use this to succeed as a business in the coming year or 2, like that's probably a struggle for many of them. And part of that comes back to what we talked about earlier around telling the story, understanding the business, knowing how the alignment works, being in lockstep versus in HR land over here, talking about engagement like it's the whatever, like the best things that sliced bread. The other part is we don't always understand when our leaders say competitiveness, when they say agility, when they say risk management, they may be talking about something that we can do, something we can touch, something we can influence, but they're not saying it in HR speak. And so we don't pick up on that cue. We miss a chance to really step up and create some value.
Yeah. I think my issue with this is, and you've kind of touched on it, is HR has like HR speak for everything. Like they like take a concept that's really relevant to the business and they HR speakify it. And then they make it to where it's like business leaders actually do care about the subject, but they don't care about it any longer because they HR kind of changed the meaning of it. Yes. And so here's an example that I would give. So the question I think you would start out if you're CEO is, what capabilities do we need to achieve our strategy? Where HR translates that and says, skills are the future, or, like all this other kind of stuff. And they're saying the same thing, but in two completely different ways. And therefore they lose the connection to the business. Mm-hmm. And so what the business really cares about is they put forward a strategy. Presumably the strategy is to change the course of the business. And then HR comes back to them and says, we're going to do the same thing we've always done. And it's like, yeah, but our business strategy is completely changing. We need our HR strategy to adjust course, specifically in what capabilities that you're building that are different than what we have today, right? So that's number one. Number two is, how will we build a deep bench of high-performing talent? So presumably the CEOs know that it's not, it's not every single human being that is changing every single thing that they're doing every day. It's generally speaking, you're placing a bet that you used to place over here and you're placing it over there now in a different part of the business. And you need that part of the business to have key high performing talent to achieve the strategy objective, right? And then to build on that is, what is our 3-year plan to win through talent? So we've changed the strategy. It's going a different direction. Now we need to look 3 years into the future to ensure that not only are we pivoting what we're doing in HR today, but we're pivoting 3 years out into the future to make sure that we're continuing to build on it. And I think this is why strategic workforce planning has become so important in recent years, is because it's one of the few functions in HR that explicitly is looking 3 years into the future when most are just focusing on today. So I know that that's my commentary on it, but any of that you would endorse, Ben?
I was going to actually ask you a follow-up on that. So for the people listening here who are thinking about all the data and all the things they can put their hands on, if HR is not asking the right question about what's coming, what's in the future, what's next, or how to align with the business, how much is it dependent on them saying, hey, I know you're not asking for this, but we think this is actually what the leadership needs to see? Like, is it likely to ever succeed if they're bringing that and trying to push a rope like that old saying, or they have to wait till the question is asked by HR? Can they influence them in some way to ask that in the right way so that the people here who are like, I've got the data, just please ask the question. I'd love to give it to you. I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. You're moving from like a push to a pull.
Yeah. Right? How is it possible to do that with some of these, like you're talking about the 3-year plan or 2-year plan? Like,
well, one of the things this kind of answer your question, but kind of not, but I think you'll see how it makes sense is one of the things I always said is the head of people analytics is presumably the CHRO's best friend. And the reason why is because no other function in HR actually looks at things from the same vantage point as the CHRO and the CEO. Every other function kind of has their vertical and they look within their walls and they say, if you're a talent acquisition person, everything can be improved through talent acquisition. If you're a learning person, everything can be improved through learning. But nobody's looking at the collective other than CHRO, other than the CEO, and other than the head of people analytics. And so what I've found is once the CHRO and the CEO are aware that this kind of capability of looking at things through this vantage point exists, it quickly moves from being a push to a pull. But you have to demonstrate the value but more so than the value, that you share their perspective and that you're helping push the direction that they want to push. And so if you can demonstrate that becomes the most key variable. And I think that's where, again, like functions like talent acquisition, like learning, like other functions often struggle when they get in the room with the CEO, is because they're only looking through their kind of myopic viewpoint instead of the holistic viewpoint in which the CEO or the C-suite is thinking about.
And see, that makes sense to me. I was talking Okay. So I was talking with the people analytics lead recently for a large financial services company. And what you said just made this so relevant. So he was saying, hey, listen, we're getting pushed to use AI in our HR function. I'm the sort of tech nerd, so they asked me to be the lead on this. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to figure this out. He said, we're getting a lot of pressure to do this around our employee service delivery, like answering questions, FAQs, service tickets, all that stuff. He said, I don't feel like that's the right way to go, but I'm not sure how to push back. I said, well, think about it this way. When was the last time do you think someone had a board meeting and HR stands up and says, listen, you'll be so proud to know that employee service queries are now being answered 70% faster. Like no one's ever said that ever. But if you walked in and said, listen, hey, last quarter we talked about this new strategy, this new competitive line of business you're hoping to launch, and y'all are curious about if we have the right talent. I've actually done the analysis. We have about 40% of the talent we need to do that. We can upskill 20% of our existing people to fit other goals, and we need to hire for the rest of that. But whenever you're ready to let me know, we think it's going to take about 6 months to get fully ramped up. To share that using skills analysis, AI tools, everything else, to share that sort of thing, suddenly as you and I talked about a couple times in this conversation, that's a conversation they're like, ooh, this is possible. And it's because of what they just shared, not how do I get this done with HR being a blocker, being in the way, or being clueless in this conversation. So that to me was an interesting tie-in to what you're saying there. Well, yes, he did like that sense of seeing it through the business lens is why he felt like this wasn't the right way to go. And when I said that, he's like, of course. Yes.
I love that. That's a super, it's a great example, Ben. I think that kind of it shows the value of kind of what you were saying earlier about being an industry analyst. You get to talk to resources in different parts of, the parts of HR, but different industries and different things like that. And they allow you to have that kind of comprehensive perspective so you can drop nuggets like you just dropped here on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Dropping nuggets. That's what I'm known for.
Dropping nuggets, bare feet, all the good things.
Bare feet. If I'm not barefoot at the next conference, someone's going to feel let down. Thank you, Cole, for starting that whole thing.
Well, Ben, you've been a fantastic guest to have on the podcast. If people haven't already, clicked the buy button on Amazon for your book, definitely go do that. But can you tell people, where can they find you? Where can they find Lighthouse? Where can they find your book? Anything to kind of promote you being here on the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book comes out, as I mentioned, in September 25. So you can pre-order that one. It will be out very, very soon. It is available on Amazon, Artificial Intelligence for HR, 3rd edition. And if you've enjoyed the conversation today, the book is written like I speak. It was actually a pushback against some academic preferences from the publisher. Like, no, it needs to be written in the way people actually like to speak and engage with each other at work. And that's what won out. LHRA.io for Lighthouse Research and Advisory. That's where you can find some of the research we mentioned today in the conversation, some of the things I mentioned around meeting at work and connecting with that for candidates, or the stuff on the data-driven HR function and others. We do a lot of research within that spectrum. And then obviously I'm on LinkedIn, like the known universe. Happy to connect there, Ben Eubanks, and let me know what you heard today that was fun, and I'd love to connect.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Ben. You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott. And today's guest, Ben Eubanks. Thanks for joining us, Ben. I want to say a big thank you to our newest patron of the podcast, Sebastian Anthony. Thanks so much for your support. I also want to say a big thank you to some of our other existing patrons of the podcast, because we'll likely be sunsetting the patron program soon. And so I'd like to say a big thank you to our patron level patrons, Shane McKnight, John Catman, Chris Mannion, and previous guests of the podcast, Joy Oliver. Also, we had some longtime supporters of Chifu, Reed Bramble, and previous guests of the podcast, Nicole Lettich. Thank you guys so much. And our one friend of the podcast level supporter, Emily Pelosi, who has her wonderful swag that we sent her. And she is also a previous guest of the podcast. So thank you so much to our patrons of the podcast. Again, likely we'll be sunsetting this soon, but thank you guys so much for what you've done over the years.